everyone. Welcome to another Expert Sales Chat. My name is John Golden from Pipeliner CRM and SalesPOP Online Sales Magazine. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Meridith Powell. How are you doing, Meridith?
I'm doing great. Excited to be here.
Excellent. And today we're going to talk about Meridith's excellent book, which is called Own It, Redefining Responsibility. So, Meridith, let's start off and give us some background about why you thought this book was necessary and what's the genesis of it.
Great question. Well, I started writing the book because it was actually a natural next book after I wrote the book, Winning in the Trust and Value Economy, which was all about how to be successful in today's shifting environment. But the big question I kept getting back from CEOs was, how do I build a culture that gets employees to want to get engaged and take ownership of my organization? And then I kept getting employees who were saying, what do I need to do to make sure I can hold on to my job and not lose my career? And I thought, there's a book. So I wrote about both of them and put it in those chapters.
So what are some of the surprising things that you uncovered when you started writing this?
You know, I think the most surprising thing was that how out of control people felt, that they really didn't understand that there were things that they could do inside their companies to take charge of their own careers. I also think that companies are under the belief that if we just create these amazing cultures of engagement, that people will actually want to get engaged. You can't force people to. I think the other surprise was just how important talent and good employees are in this economy. The only competitive advantage you have left.
Yeah. No, it's interesting that you mentioned that about, creating these engaging, cultures or whatever. I think a lot of the time, and, correct me if I'm wrong from your experience, a lot of the time this kind of comes off as gimmicky, as a kind of a check the box, as like, we do so much for employee engagement. But I think, as your book points out, I don't think they go deep enough into understanding what employees really care about.
Yeah, I really found two things to talk about your point that made me laugh. One is you talk about gimmicky. Some cultures of engagement I came across sounded more like going to a spa than getting a job.
Right.
It's like they were pretty much doing all these employees would get massages, they would do this and that. The other is that a lot and more than not created environments, but they didn't walk their talk. They didn't really follow through. Engagement was something somebody else ought to do. It wasn't something that leadership really held on to.
Yeah. And then in one of your chapters, and this is where we stray into a whole minefield now, and we start showing our age.
Yes.
I mean, at what stage did we turn into those people who talked about the younger generation? That used to be us. So one of your chapters, you have the new employee, right? What's wrong with the younger generation? So tell me a little bit about that, because I'm sure people are fascinated, because people of our age obviously struggle a little bit.
Yeah. You led into this perfectly, and that is, see, I don't really buy into this younger generation thing. I think the way exactly how we were talking was exactly how our parents were talking, I think, since the beginning of time. But I think the bigger thing to understand is that no matter an employee's age this day, employees, we used to go to work, speaking of you and I and the age we are, and we believed that if we worked hard, we could retire there. We'd get a pension.
Sure.
We wouldn't be outsourced or downsized. Every employee, no matter their age, is worried about losing their job. And no employer can guarantee a job. And with those things off the table, you've got to realize as a leader, you've got to put something else back in its place.
Right. No, I totally agree with that, because it's a much obviously less secure in many ways environment that people exist in today. And one thing actually I wanted to ask you, because here's a phenomenon that I've seen starting to creep in, right? So once upon a time, we located ourselves where our business was, right? So the office building, and we bought a house nearby and all of that. But now, over the last while, especially since the last recession, there's a lot more employees are going, I'm going to go live where I want to live, and then I'm going to find a remote job or something, because if I buy a house next to the business, they could fire me next year. Right. So we have this. So there's a little bit now of a shifting balance, right?
Yeah, and I think and right there, exactly what you're talking about is the biggest challenge companies have today, is they still think they're operating in an environment where employees will go and move and do whatever they ask. And you're exactly right. Employees are thinking, I'm going to put my life first, and I'll work it out because there isn't a guarantee with my job. I personally think it ends entitlement on both sides. Companies feel they have to hold on to people, and people don't feel like they have to stay there for 50 years. I think it's very healthy for business, but we have to get our minds different around it.
So on that note, let's talk a little bit about how do you engage with employees if a lot of them are remote? So, because it's one of the things that I see a lot of companies struggle with now, because, you know, they can build a culture if everybody's in an office together and they know each other face to face. When a lot more people are spread out and remote, that becomes a lot harder. So how do you engage with people when they're remote?
Yeah, you know, I think that in today's environment with so many remote employees, you have to rely a lot more on building and having communication. I mean, you have to have ways that they're in the loop with things that are going on. The other thing is the most powerful way to engage people, whether they're present with you in the office or remote, is to give them ownership and skin in the game.
Right.
To put them in charge of projects, ask them for feedback and input, you know, things like that, because that makes people take responsibility. And the moment that their idea becomes part of the cloth of how the organization moves forward, they care. The last thing I'm going to say about that is the most powerful companies I see that employ a lot of remote workers at least find one opportunity a year to bring them together in person. And I think we way undervalue in this economy how important we still want community. We're still human beings. Yeah,
and we're still those social animals, right? Even, and I think even because you can see people are even starting to somewhat, you know, drift away from social media a little bit more and actually crave real interaction. So in your book, you have a couple of chapters here that I think are very interesting. Number one, you talk about our traditional approach, and then in the next chapter, you talk about time to turn employee engagement on its head. So what's the traditional approach, and what are we turning on our head?
The traditional approach is what I like to call the golden handcuffs. So the traditional approach is that you get a job and you get great benefits, you get a retirement, and pretty much you do what the company tells you to do because you've got a secure paycheck.
Right.
And that's pretty much our traditional approach to engagement is I'm going to offer a great job with a good salary and great benefits. That doesn't fly anymore. And it doesn't fly anymore because the younger generation doesn't care as much about benefits as the older generation, and because they don't believe they're going to be there. And turning it on its head means it's not about telling employees what to do anymore. It's about involving them in the process. Companies really have to begin by creating trust. They've got to have purpose. They need something to engage in. When I was researching the book, the most disengaged workers were government employees, and the most engaged were nonprofits. So it tells you how much purpose matters. And then secondly, they need skin in the game. They need to be a part of it. And then I think the last piece, and it's a piece that companies miss a lot, is how much people want to be developed and coached and invested in. They don't have to be president and CEO the next day, but they need to be learning and growing. I mean, again, we're social animals. Progress means a lot to us. I mean, we want to learn a new skill. We want to try out something new. And you have to be allowing employees to do that. So often we say invest in the company, but we forget to invest in them.
Yeah, no, I like that. Actually, it's one interesting thing in Singapore, right? You know, government jobs are one of the most sought after ones, but they are incented and they're goal oriented and they're run like private businesses. And I always wish that, you know, that model was translate over, because I think it would help. I think government and state employees or whatever would enjoy, you know, having more of a results oriented culture rather than a bureaucratic one. And then you say looking inward, your reality. So what do you mean by looking inward?
You know, looking inward is that you've got to look at your own culture and really stop pretending that everything is okay. And that most CEOs that I deal with don't really want to deal with employee engagement because it's gray and it's mushy and it's not easy. You know, it isn't a one size fits all. And so again, to your point before, we create these programs and we check a box and we think it's done. But in today's environment, you really have to take an honest look at yourself. Are your employees there? Are they staying? Have they quit and stayed? And are they giving you everything they've got? And are you providing the right environment for them? So looking inward and dealing with your reality is really about taking a reality check on your own business.
So how do you then, as a CEO or a business leader, how do you make sure that it's a balancing act, right? Because you see, as I said, you see in some cultures, they go a little bit too over the top and all they're worried about all the time is like, are my employees happy? Well, guess what? No employee is happy all the time, right? It's called, as we know, it's called work for a reason. And you can't create, it's ridiculous to think that you can create an environment where you come to work every day and you're like, whoa, this is fabulous. But some people seem to think that that's the goal at the end of the day, when I think what you're saying is that's not the goal at the end of the day. The goal is that you get your best out of people. They feel fulfilled, they feel attached to the company, and they want to work hard. So how do you strike that balancing act?
Yeah, I think that's the difference between entitlement and engagement.
Right.
I think when people are worried all the time as to whether their employees are happy, they're building a culture of entitlement. Mm-hmm. And you want to make sure that it's a two-way street. I mean, the reason that I wrote the book the way I did, and part of it is for leaders to build the right culture. Mm-hmm. The last part of the book is written for the employee going, it's your life, it's your career. What are you doing waiting for somebody else to mm-hmm. engage you? And so you've got to make sure that you're creating an environment where people want to get engaged and involved. But if they're not getting engaged and involved, get them off your team.
Right.
Because it isn't entitlement. It isn't that you show up and work for me and I make sure you have ping pong, you get a massage, you get a great salary. And if you do your job, then I'm just grateful. It's not like that. What it is I'm going to lay an environment that you can really excel in. But if you don't excel, I don't want you on my team. Mm-hmm. And I think it has to be like that. And I really define it by entitlement and engagement. And I see way too much entitlement out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the fact that the last part of your book is about the employee themselves and personal responsibility and accountability, because I really think that that's something that has been lost a lot over the last number of years. I mean, we all, you ask anybody, is accountability important? They say absolutely, but they mean holding other people accountable. They don't mean holding themselves, because it's a whole other issue. But I like that whole idea of personal responsibility, because you often hear people say like, well, what's the company do? Where's my career plan? What are you doing for me? Well, in my career growing up, I was always thought, hang on, I'm the one who should be looking after my career, right? So, I mean, so talk to me a little bit about that whole idea of taking personal responsibility as opposed to outsourcing it.
Okay, John, you're never going to get off this interview now because this is my passion. When I first told my publisher I wanted to put responsibility in the title, they said, you can't do that. Nobody wants to read a book about responsibility. and I unless
you made the book how to make other people responsible.
But exactly for the reasons that you said, is we're always looking for somebody else to do it. And we've sort of become a society about being a victim. Mm-hmm. Now, being a victim is a lot of fun because it's a lot of fun to sit around and talk about why my life is all your fault. Mm-hmm. But the problem with being a victim is that it's all you're ever going to be. The more time you spend whining and complaining about what isn't fair, the longer you stay in that hole. And so the reason I really wanted to get on that soapbox is because I feel like we're doing people a disservice to say that it's somebody else's job to do something for you, because you can't control somebody else, but you can control yourself. And so I very much wanted to give employees the tools that they needed to succeed, because we all know if you get one good boss in your lifetime, you are lucky. Mm-hmm. Nobody's going to care about your career more than you are. So, but what I do feel like was missing from people is, even if they did care, what are the tools they need? And that last part of the book says, step by step, this is what you do.
Yeah, and I like also, the fact that you say attitude is a choice as well, and you get into that, because that's another area, because let's face it, at the end of the day, and we've all been probably guilty of it in our careers at times. I know I have. You stay too long in a job and you sit there and you complain about it and it's terrible and everything, until one day, as happened to me years ago, somebody turns around and says, well, stop complaining, either leave or shut up, right? And I'm like, okay, yeah, okay, that makes sense. But the attitude that you have to ask yourself at the end of the day is, am I unhappy because of the actual external situation around me here, or am I unhappy? Can I do something about it internally? Is this coming from me?
Yes. I think that and I think really in today's marketplace, people are, since 2008, people have really been facing challenges, layoffs, aging parents, all those things. So I think that people come into the workforce today with even more baggage than they ever have.
Right.
And work is something you can control and complain about. It's safe. You can't really complain about your spouse if you still live with them. You can't complain about your kids because then you're a bad parent. And, God help you if you think taking care of your aging parents is a burden. You're a bad person. But your boss you can complain about. That's safe. But unfortunately, again, you do need to make a choice. If you don't want to be there, then leave. Either get on the ship or get off. But again, that's where I feel like leaders really have got to understand in today's marketplace, you can't handle dead weight. There's not enough fat margin.
So what's one of the ways that anyone listening today, so maybe somebody is, maybe they're not so happy in their job. Maybe they're feeling like their career is stagnated. As you say, they find themselves complaining a lot about, work and their boss, and he or she are always like putting them down, stopping them. What are a couple of things that anybody could do starting today or tomorrow or Monday to change this?
Well, you just described 3/4 of the workforce. So the very first thing that they need to do, and you just alluded to, is number one, check their attitude. Is to say, I can't do anything about changing any of this right now, but I can change how I react to it. But if you're really unhappy, if that's not what you want to do for the rest of your life, the first thing is you have to start to figure out what it is that you want to do. And most people can't answer that question. So the advice that I always have is, look around you and look for people that are living a life that you want, not just a career. They have a personal life and a professional life, and you love the whole package. And then start to talk to them and interview them. How did they get on that path? What struggles did they go through? What advice did they have for you? Because the more advice you get, the more opportunity you're going to get. So that is really always my first piece, is figure out what you want to do, but do it by interviewing people whose lives you admire. And the reason I say personal and professional together is because I chased a professional track that I really wanted. And I wound up with a job that consumed my entire life. It was not in the city I wanted to live in. It was not the life I wanted. And you've got to think of your life as a whole.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly important, to take that holistic view. And I also love what you say. Yeah, if you ask most people, they can tell you what they don't want to do, but they can't tell you what they really want to do. And I think the other thing, and this is one of my soapboxes, I think is everything in life comes with choices, right? And choices means compromise. And it means that if you choose one thing, by default, you're unchoosing other things. And people hate to do that, right? So often, you probably found this in your research, often people stay stuck in a job, or they don't fulfill themselves because they're not prepared to make the compromises that they have to make in order to, choose a particular path, right?
Absolutely. It is amazing to me how unhappy people will stay rather than take a risk to do something different. But John, I'd even say it deeper than that. What I'd encourage people to do is, even if you're not happy with what you're doing and you're not sure what you want to do and you don't want to make a major change, you can at least go talk to your supervisor or your leader and just say, I want to do something new and different. Is there a project I could work on?
Right.
Taking that responsibility to try to stretch yourself and to grow, and just, if you take it step by step, you really will get there.
Okay, so in the conclusion of the book, you calling the shots. So what's the conclusion? How do you call the shots?
The way that you call your shots is, number one, if you are a leader, you are calling the shots, because if you have dotted your I's, you have crossed the T's, you have followed the book and created the culture, then you get the best and the brightest beating a path to your door, and you have the right to kick the rest of the people out of the company. So you're in charge of the talent pool that works for you. On the other side of the coin, if you're an employee, and even if you're in the worst of environments, you have a boss that you don't know how they got in that position, you still have the skills, the tools, and the resources now to be in charge of your career. Mm-hmm. And for both sides, there's no excuses anymore. For leaders, there's no room to complain about bad employees. And for employees, there's no room to complain about a dead-end job. Ultimate responsibility. And I think that's the path to freedom.
Awesome. I love that. That's a fantastic ending. I would echo those words: personal responsibility, take charge of yourself. And that is, I do believe that's the path to freedom. And I think that once you take responsibility for your life, whether personal or professional, it's very liberating. And I think people are often very afraid of taking ownership and kind of taking a step back and going, where I am today is my fault. Whether it's a fantastic place or whether it's a not so great place, it's my fault. And I think once you do that, that's so liberating.
So unbelievable, because then you're back focused on the things you can control.
Yeah, exactly. Well, listen, Meridith, we could talk for a lot longer, and we'll hopefully have you back to talk a little bit more. But before we go, just share with everybody a little bit more about yourself, how they can learn more about you and how they can contact you.
Well, great. Well, as you had mentioned, I am a coach, speaker, and an author, and I actually live in Asheville, North Carolina. You can find about me on my website at valuespeaker.com. I got videos, blogs, all kinds of information. And I've got tons of information on pipeliner.com and SalesPOP. So you can find me all over there as well. And I really welcome people to reach out and connect with me. I love it.
Excellent. And I would highly, highly recommend that you get Meridith's book, Own It, Redefining Responsibility, and reading it, because I do think it's one of the missing pieces. And if most people just read that, either leadership or people, I think you'd flourish. All right. Well, listen, thanks again, Meridith. It's been great talking with you.
Thank you.
Okay. My name is John Golden, SalesPOP Online Sales Magazine, Pipeliner CRM. I'll see you all again soon. Bye now.